students. Welcome back to the realm of history. Get a little action in here for the chapter 26 review. Want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and making sure we're focused for tomorrow. It is going to be one of the final grades that are going to go into the book for marking period number 3. So our time is getting short, so we really want to make sure that you maximize your efforts on this last upcoming quiz. Hey, while we're at it, let me know that you're here in the chat. Shoot me a hello so that when I go back through later, I can check out who was here. It just helps me get an understanding of when I grade the quizzes, kind of who did well that was here, and maybe who scored well that didn't show up too. So that helps me out breaking down some statistical data. If you want to help me out a little bit for the channel, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, please help me out by subscribing. Okay, what we're going to be doing tonight, little live agenda action here. I'll always start with some key advice for you. Number 2, today, basically, I'm going to be going over the terms and the figures. I'll go over those. I really try to simplify those for you so you really know what to expect for tomorrow. Number 3, I will talk about some of the short answer possibilities. Because there's no AP version, I'm probably not going to go through too many of the details, but I'll kind of tell you what to prepare for there. Number 4 is null and void. You don't have to worry about the AP advice because there's no AP portion for this quiz. Got a little lucky there. Then, of course, as always, we'll have a little question and answer session at the end. Any questions that you have, I'll do my best to answer. Some things I may elect not to answer tonight. I want to make sure that you are putting in the time as well. And then I'll close off with a little bit of final advice. Okay, let's move into the key advice section here first. First of all, I think it's pertinent for you to write things down from the session. I would be active. Make sure that you're paying attention. If you're putting in the time to be here, I appreciate you. But of course, I want to make sure that you get the most out of it. So write things down from this session and be attentive. Number 2, as always, hey, pray for the right things, right? We have a lot to pray for in our world today, to be honest with you. And I want to make sure that we are praying for the right things. Once again, don't pray for this quiz. Don't pray for victories in basketball or victories in hockey or victories this track season coming up or softball season or baseball, whatever it may be, crew, whatever you're going to be participating in. One of the things I would say right now, if I'm going to say my prayers, it's going to be for the health and safety of my family, health and safety of my students, your health and safety. But also I'm going to say a prayer for all the people in the world who are going through just very treacherous things. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So we have to remember the prayer of gratitude because we really are just so blessed to have the wonderful lives that we do at St. Mary's. Being able to be here tonight studying for a quiz instead of having to scramble for avoiding bombs or where we're going to get our next meal or where we're going to settle and get a new job. So, it's very important that you keep things in perspective. Number 3, I think it's also important to be here now. I mean, that is my motto. That should be the motto that we go by every day. You want to focus on the task at hand. Tomorrow, you may have 4 or 5 quizzes, I hear. That's good, right? Good. Challenge yourself, rise and meet that challenge, which we'll talk about in a second. But to do that, you need to really use be here now. If your first hour is math and you got a quiz, you need to be focused on math. Be there now. If your second hour is world history and you have my quiz, when you come in the realm, you pop in world history and you take out math and you take out what's going on at home and you take out practice. Pop in world history. So for me, obviously I'm the world history teacher, so that's what I'm going to focus on. But I want you to be successful in your other classes too. Okay, so make sure that you are being there now in those other classes. Number 4, I say this every live review, but make sure that you're thanking your parents because all of those blessings that we just talked about praying for and thanking the good Lord, yes, the good Lord provides those, but your parents also provide you with all those blessings and safeties and security. So make sure that you're giving thanks to your parents as well. Tell them that you love them. Okay, give them a hug before you go to bed. Just make sure that you're doing the right thing. That's important. Number 5, meet the challenge. Hey, the challenge tomorrow may be I have 6 quizzes. Maybe you're that student. Do I feel bad for you? Not really. I think it's a good challenge. Rise to the occasion. Make sure that you overcome those obstacles. If you spend too much time dwelling about the fact that you have 6 quizzes, you're not going to be focused on the task at hand. So make it a positive. Tell yourself, hey, I got 6 quizzes. Good. It's going to make me a better student in the long run. So that's what I want you to take as your attitude going into, of course, tomorrow's day. All right. I want to thank you for joining tonight again as well. As far as for my sponsor, I have talked to my sponsor, and the Cocoa Bombs are going to have some spring specials coming up. They're going to be released here pretty soon. So make sure that you are paying attention to that, and maybe put in this spring, you can still do a little Cocoa Bombs, little hot chocolate. Summertime, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll innovate there. But for right now, there's going to be some special action coming your way here pretty soon. So pay attention to that Instagram. Okay, here we go into the key terminology. Okay, so I've got on the screen really a simplified version of what you should really focus on. Okay, one of the first things on the sheet was the Reform Bill of 1832, and this came all the way from Section 1. So what the Reform Bill of 1832 did is it granted voting rights to the wealthy middle class men. Prior to this, only about 5% of the British population could vote, which were only very wealthy male. But now portions of the middle class can vote. So it was pretty advantageous, and it really helped get suffrage to more people. It started the movement to get more suffrage for different groups. Next is extending that a little bit further with what's called the Chartist movement. The Chartist movement wanted to extend voting rights to all males. And so it wanted to make also voting private in a ballot so that nobody could kind of sway your opinion. And it wanted to pay parliament members for their service, so they weren't just volunteering anymore and they could be held accountable. The Chartist movement was propagated by a document called the People's Charter of 1838. This is the document that called for those things that I just aforementioned in the Chartist movement. A lot of questions today about the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829. I'm not sure where people were when I taught this in class, but I definitely taught this in class. And what this act does is it gives many rights back to Catholics in Ireland. Those Catholics had their rights taken away by the British during the Protestant Reformation in the 15 and 1600s, or you could say the 16th and 17th centuries. When you say the 16th century, you're actually referring to the 1500s. When you say the 17th century, you're actually referring to the 1600s. When you say the first century, you're referring to years 1 through 99. So that's why that's the first century. The second century would be the 100s. Okay, so always remember that's important. All right, next, the Great Famine. The potato famine that caused a fungus in the potatoes of Ireland ended up killing about 1 million people due to starvation and disease. Another 1.5 million people migrated out of Ireland and into the US, Canada, Australia, so on and so forth. So really the biggest modern famine in world history. Pretty easy one here, the Third Republic of France. It's just kind of defined as being the third attempt at a republic in France, and it was fairly successful. It lasted for a very long time. We just recently learned about the Dominion of Canada. Canada was granted this state of being a dominion in which they had control over domestic affairs, but they also were still part of the British Empire. So they could only make decisions on really ideas that were affecting within Canada. They couldn't really make foreign relations or wars or anything outside of Canada. Next is home rule. Home rule is actually really similar to being a dominion. It's almost the same thing, but it was particular to Ireland. It's basically control over internal matters once again. Hint, hint here, the women's suffrage movement, there's most likely going to be a short answer regarding the women's suffrage movement. The way that you want to define this would be that this is referring to women who were fighting for the right to vote. It started off as a peaceful protest, demonstrations, marches, but then it later became a militant and violent series of movements with the women, especially under the leadership of Emmy Lynn Pankhurst. She's a key figure that you would really need to mention in your answer to get the full credit there. Next, let's look at Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny came from Section 3, which was the topic that I had you outline from the textbook. Manifest Destiny is the U.S. thought process that they basically had the God-given right to rule North America from coast to coast, meaning Atlantic to Pacific. And It was basically used as a justification for early Americans to expand westward. We're working our way down the list. To secede, an important term. It means to withdraw or remove. And in the case of what we're learning about in this chapter, it's how the South withdrew from the North, which basically propagated the United States Civil War. The Emancipation Proclamation, this was a declaration by Lincoln, which declared all slaves in the South as free. It was a declaration. It didn't mean that they were freed on the spot, but it was the declaration that they were declared to be free males. The Dreyfus Affair was something a little bit more complicated. It happened in France. In France, there was a Jewish military captain who was accused of selling secrets to the Germans. This was false, and it was made up by other non-Jewish captains that were jealous of Alfred Dreyfus, and they made this whole story up to get him in trouble. He was found guilty based on the false evidence, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But it later came out that these people were lying about him, which proved that there was a great deal of anti-Semitism, not only in France, but in other parts of Europe as well. Next is the idea of mass culture. It was the final point that I made of section 4. Mass culture are things like entertainment, music, art, sporting events, radio, things of that nature that appeal to the masses. Or when we say the masses, we're talking about a very large audience of people. The U.S. Reconstruction Period. This was another one that people had a lot of questions about today. This is a time period that came into play after the U.S. Civil War, in which both the North and the South tried to figure out how they would rebuild the Union together. How are they going to bring things back together and make the entire Union stronger? It was a tumultuous time period in U.S. history, actually. There were a lot of segregation. Jim Crow laws were going on. There were still issues going on between the North and the South. All right, at this point, we've been going for about 13 minutes, and we're now going to move into the key figures. I am going to keep the key figures rather short. It's pretty simple. What you'll need to know, hey, what did they do? What did they invent? How did they change people's daily lives? So that's what we're going to look at here next, starting with your boy Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was, first of all, an American inventor. We talked about some of the key inventions that he propagated, like the light bulb, the phonograph, which was a sound recording device. And then I suggested that a lot of historians will argue that his research laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, was really his greatest invention. So that's what you'll need to know about Thomas Edison. Guglielmo Marconi is the inventor of the radio. Very simple. The inventor of the radio. Alexander Graham Bell is the inventor of the telephone. So once again, I'm keeping this pretty simple for you, so you really know exactly what you're going to be up against tomorrow on the quiz. Remember, there's no AP portion, so this is it. Henry Ford didn't invent the assembly line. That was an invention of Eli Whitney. Make sure you don't confuse that. But utilized the assembly line to revolutionize the way that cars were made. That's really the key thing you need to know about Henry Ford. Uses the assembly line idea to revolutionize the way that cars were made. Ivan Pavlov, I taught you about yesterday. I taught you the idea of Pavlov's dog experiment with the classical conditioning. The idea that you can train someone or something to associate something like a sound with some other type of stimulus, like eating food. So Pavlov's dog proves that people can be trained and conditioned to expect certain things from other stimuli. Marie Curie, famous female scientist that studied radioactivity and radiation. Section 4 she was in. Charles Darwin, theory of evolution and the theory of natural selection. In class, the way that I taught this was survival of the fittest, right? That certain species have an adaptation that makes them faster, for example. If you're talking about a group of antelope, right? And they're going to be hunted by lion, okay, on the African savanna. One of the things that you have to understand is that the faster antelope are going to most likely survive those attacks. So the ones that are going to die earlier are the slower antelope, right? So what's going to happen is fast antelope are going to mate with fast antelope, which is going to create a fast offspring. So what's going to happen is all antelope are going to become fast. That's the adaptation that helps them survive. Whereas another species of animal, let's say a wildebeest, can't run as fast. Maybe the lion attacks them because he can catch them easier. Louis Pasteur, all right, next key baller on the list. Louis Pasteur was a French scientist that developed the process of pasteurization, which is heating liquid to kill germs. And this is because he believed in the germ theory of disease, which is where bacteria is now found to cause diseases. You also had Joseph Lister. I talked about him with the surgical procedures, a very similar scientist to Louis Pasteur. His work, though, created the use of antiseptics and kept medical buildings and surgical centers much cleaner, which improved the yield of survival rate from 50% to about 85%. Your key boys, Wilbur and Orville Wright, the brothers from Dayton, Ohio, they are the developers of the first gas-powered airplane, okay, in a basic sense. Then finally, I don't really think I need to go over this one, but I will just in case. Abraham Lincoln was the United States president during the United States Civil War. Okay, that is my list. We're at 18 minutes roughly. We've got about 40 ballers on, which is great. I do want to give you a couple more points of advice. So before we move on and before I get to my final advice, I'm just going to give you a couple of key pointers that I think you may benefit from. Number one, I think you really need to read section 4 tonight. It's a pretty short section, but I would encourage you to read section 4 because I didn't assign it because I was trying to keep your homework load this first week back kind of limited. So I didn't assign it, but I think it's very important for you to read that and comprehend it very well. It's got a lot of people that we didn't talk about too much in lecture that will show up on the review sheet, like Marie Curie, like Sigmund Freud, who I had you add, and I told you the answer to Freud today in class. So those are going to be some pertinent things. Number 2, I always tell you to read through your outlines. Read through all section outlines carefully. I would say several times through would be the way to go. And then finally, utilize the video lessons. Like that's why I make them, so that you can hear my voice talking you through all of the things that are important from section 1, section 2, and in this chapter, section 4. I didn't do one on section 3 because, quite frankly, it's about the United States Civil War, which you should have some prior knowledge on. And I want you to take ownership over that section anyway. All right. At this time, I think we're going to talk briefly about the short answer. So please pay attention. I really don't want to do the short answer for you. All right. I want you to take ownership. I'll tell you kind of what the question basic is, but I'm not going to say what the answer is tonight. All right. So don't ask me in the comments to go over the answers of the short answer. You just put in the due diligence, read through your notes, read through the text, and make sure that you can do it. The first one, what you'll need to know is you're going to need to know about the germ theory of disease. And you've got 2 key figures that I just talked about a second ago that really propagated understanding that germ theory of disease and some changes that they made. So you're going to want to be able to describe their major findings and the developments that came from that theory. A second one to be prepared for is understanding what the French were doing in Canada and how Canada gained self-rule or becoming a dominion. So you got to talk about the fur trade. You know, the fur trade, or what we call the middle ground, was really important to be able to explain. Okay. I said that the fur trade was the middle ground. So that's something that you'll need to know there. A third one is to write a description of the women's suffrage movement. Talk about the different stages. Talk about key figures that were involved in that movement. And was it successful? When was it successful? I talked about that in section 1 predominantly. Other possibilities would include the Reconstruction Period, reasons why the United States Civil War were fought, and then a final one. Actually, that's it. That's about 5 right there. Some versions will have 3 questions, and some versions will have 5. All right, I am going to check the comments now, and I'm going to open it up for questions here. I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. Hey, Gabe, how you doing, buddy? It's nice to see you on here. Thanks for joining with us. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of key ballers on, which is great. All right, I'm just looking for some questions. Okay, I'm looking at the questions. Go ahead and throw your questions into the chat, and I'll start answering them. Here's the first one right here. Can I repeat dominion? Sure. Dominion is basically a country that has control over domestic affairs or internal affairs, but they remain part of an empire. So in the case of point here is that Canada was a dominion of the British Empire. So they had control over internal matters, but they couldn't make decisions anything outside their country. Master Julian, what is anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is prejudice or hatred toward the Jewish population. This was going on in France and other parts of Europe during this time. And then it stays in Europe. Okay. You have Nazi Germany, which was another big use of anti-Semitism. And in some places in the world, it's still going on today. Okay. It's hatred. It's evil. It's prejudice. Do we need to know about radioactivity? No, Alex, not really. I mean, this class is more about like the history behind it. So you want to know that Marie Curie studied it and really put forward the ideas of what effects or impacts it has, like radiation and how that can be used. So I'm not going to really make you talk about the ins and outs of it on the quiz. But knowing that Marie Curie worked on it would be the most important thing for this one. Finally. Yeah, of course. But see, you told everybody that you didn't show up to after school crew, but how could you have moved my markers if you didn't show up? Gotcha. Johnny K. The answer to this question, you got Louis Pasteur and then you got Joseph Lister. And then we talked about Listerine being one of the first antiseptics that Lister used to keep his surgical tables and equipment very clean. Kirkulator, that's also the answer there. You got Louis Pasteur and you've got Joseph Lister. Okay, those are the 2 key figures that you want to know there. Lexia K. Good win, by the way, Lexia K. Good win tonight. What to know about the People's Charter of 1838? People's Charter of 1838 fought to give all males the right to vote, even working class men. So that's really another step in the suffrage rights movement. That's what you want to take a look at there. Who led the women's suffrage movement? Well, there were a lot of people, Alex. The most important would be Emmy Lynn Pankhurst. Emmy Lynn Pankhurst would be the most important leader. And there was a group called the WSPU that he forms. Yep. He's wearing that fitted cap. Yes, sir. Dominic, can you repeat some key figures we should know about the suffrage movement? I'm really going to stick with Emmy Lynn Pankhurst as being the biggest one. I think that's the most important one that I would focus on. Yeah. Kirk, please clarify. Please, is it skipping after school crew that you're talking about? Or did somebody do something that I missed? Jacob, your crew cannot say these things on the chat. I'm not even going to pull you up. Your crew, you're trying to get Ashton in trouble. So let's crew another week for Jacob. All right. Any other real questions? Let's not be too silly out here. I want to answer real questions, getting you ready for the quiz. I try to do my due diligence there to get you ready. But if anybody has any questions, I would love to, of course, answer those for you guys tonight. Thanks, Kirk. Pia Z, who is Freud? Well, Sigmund Freud was a psychologist, and for what I'm able to really talk about on live here, for Sigmund Freud, he really taught about the subconscious mind, which is kind of, in a long story short, he's talking about thoughts that you have that you don't even know you're having. I know that sounds weird, but he says there are thoughts inside your mind that are there, but you are not thinking them. They're just deep in your mind, then you can't even comprehend them. Okay. So there's subconscious. So there's something called a Freudian slip, where you might say a swear word and you didn't even think about saying that swear word. Okay. It just slips out. And Freud would say, well, if you said the word, your subconscious was thinking about it. That's what he taught. He taught other things, but that's, I think, safe for what we can talk about here. Johnny says, for the Civil War reasons, isn't there only one? Well, it's debatable. Here's the thing. I would say slavery is the bigger factor, but it was really about states' rights to either have slavery or not. So yes, slavery is the overarching answer, but states' rights and whether states should decide what type of state they were going to be, or the federal government having the power to decide. That's really what causes the war there. Yes, a lot, Dominic, here. Knowing about the fur trade with Canada and the French, you want to know that they mutually benefited, right? The French were getting the fur. The natives were mostly really good at trapping it, whereas the natives were getting like French goods, like metal cookware, the horse, guns, mirrors, things of that nature were being given to the natives. So they were both mutually benefiting. And that's why the French and the natives had such a great relationship. It was based on this middle ground. Whew. Nice picture, Wars. Who is, I don't know who that is, but that's funny. Can you go over the format again? Sure. You're going to be up against roughly 30 to 35 questions. You're going to have multiple choice. You're going to have matching, and 3 to 5 short answer. Which short answer are you confused about? The middle ground, the fur trade? Yeah, you want to know about that mutual benefit, and then you want to know what two players were involved and why the fur trade became the middle ground, and how that benefited them. Well, how did Canada become a dominion? You remember the Durham Report? I taught you about this in section 2. We said that they sent in this guy, Lord Durham. You had Upper and Lower Canada. He decides, nah, that's not a good idea. We need to make it one province. Then we need to bring in more British people to stamp out the French population, he says. But then he also says that they should be able to govern themselves. That was one of his big suggestions. And so that's where the Dominion idea comes out of. It comes out of the Durham Report by Lord Durham. Gabby, you're just going to need to know the ones that are listed on the review sheet for the most part. And then any that I mentioned when I went over the key figures, those would be the ones that you really need to focus in on. Okay. I am here and I am ready and willing to answer any final questions that students may have. So I'm just going to wait a few more moments and then I will do my best to answer those. Look at Gabby picture. Let's see. I can't see it. What does it say there, Josh? I see that that's your eyeball, which is terrible, but what does it say in the little caption? You'll need to reference that. What's fan behavior? Oh, you're taking pictures in class. That's what it says. Why would you do that? I don't like that action. Johnny K got a real question. For this chapter, I'm really not going to have you describe the inventions. I just need you to know who made them. I don't even need you to know the year. It might be, I mean, it is a history class, so being able to put things in chronological order is important. For this quiz, it's going to be a matching. So knowing who invented it, what the invention was, is going to be the most important part. Yes, Master Dominic. Pavlov, with the Pavlov's dog experiment, which you have in the picture there. Pavlov's dog experiment is the basis for classical conditioning. Yes, that is correct. Okay. All right. I'm seeing a lot of flirting and trying to get other people in trouble going on in the comments, but I don't see very many real questions. So I'm going to wait about one more minute and we'll go from there. Yeah, there is no AP action tomorrow. There's no AP content tomorrow. Okay, any other real questions? Yeah, I mean, Johnny, I'm not wearing a fitted on that one. I'm not even wearing a flex fit on that one. I don't think. I mean, I think I'm being pretty honest. Yes, Ashton, Jacob D, you saw what was going on earlier. So if you've been paying attention, you know what I'm kind of referencing. Okay, all right. I think that's about it. I would like to make some final statements here. Number one, remember, hey, say thank you to your parents. Make sure that you tell them that you love them and give them a great thank you for all of the things that they do for you. And then I would say tonight, read section 4. Study all your notes. Read them 1 time, 2 times, 3 times through. Watch the video lessons if you're unsure about anything. If you want to hear my voice reminding you of what are the most important things. Those are some of the things that I think would be very helpful. I would say, like, there's a couple things from section 3 and section 4, like manifest destiny, like the amendments that were talked about in section 3 that ended slavery, 13th Amendment, right? So those amendments are really important to kind of take into account. And then section 4, like anything that you read that talks about inventions or different ways that made people's lives easier, more feasible, those would be things that you would really need to focus in on. I think that's about it. We can keep this one pretty short, 35 minutes. Once again, I want to say congratulations to both the girls basketball team. It was a pretty exciting game for a while, pretty close game. And then also the boys hockey team, which it was pretty packed house there at Cranbrook. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that I'm here to support you in any way that I can. And if you have any further questions after this, you can always email me or use social media to contact me as well. I usually try to respond as quick as I can. So that's something that I do promise you as well. Okay. Hey, I love all of you. I'm really fortunate to have all of you as my students. I'm fortunate to be able to spend time with you. And our time is getting short. It's kind of bittersweet because we really only have about 10 weeks left. And then a couple of those weeks will be spring break. So it's going to go much faster than you think. So I would like to ask for your help in behaving in class, making sure that we finish the year right, the way that we started it. I would like to say, while there's still 25 people on, I've noticed kind of an uptick in goofiness, and it's kind of hard to get through lessons lately. So I would really encourage you to try to get yourself back on track and be a leader. You can lead by example. I think that's really important. Okay. That being said, have a wonderful night. Get your final studies in, and we'll see you for the quiz tomorrow. All right. Take it easy. I love you too. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It means a lot.